The morning sun had barely stretched its golden arms across the city when Victor Grayson stormed out of the high-end downtown cafe with his designer suit sharp as a blade, and his ego even sharper, clutching a steaming cup of premium roast coffee like it was a symbol of the power he believed he owned. He was a man known for his wealth, his influence, and his notoriously short temper, the kind of man who believed the world should part before him, like waves before a yacht. And today, after a rough board meeting and a string of minor annoyances, he was ready to release his frustration on the first thing that dared stand in his way, and fate, always listening, always observing, sent him the perfect target in the form of a rugged biker pulling into the curb, his engine growling like thunder and his leather jacket creaking as he swung, his leg off the motorcycle, completely unaware that his day was about to collide violently with the fury of the man who believed himself untouchable. The biker, who went by the name Hawk, had a presence that demanded respect not because of money or status, but because he carried himself with a quiet, unshakable confidence, the kind forged from years of hardship and survival, the kind that made people instinctively step back. But Victor wasn't most people. He was blinded by his arrogance, by a worldview where wealth equaled dominance, and so as Hawk stood up and removed his helmet, revealing shaggy hair and a scar running along his jaw, Victor's irritation exploded, and in a split second, fueled by entitlement rather than reason, he shouted, "Watch where you're parking, you filthy biker," before shoving the full cup of scorching hot coffee directly into Hawk's face, the steaming liquid splashing across the biker's skin with a hiss like fire meeting flesh, causing several onlookers to gasp and a nearby woman to cover her mouth in shock as Hawk staggered backward, blinking in pain but somehow staying calm, though his jaw tightened like steel as he wiped the dripping coffee from his cheeks and stared at Victor with an expression not of rage, but of something far more dangerous: disappointment, pity, and a deep understanding of what kind of man stood in front of him. Victor puffed out his chest, smirking at the reactions around him, basking in the twisted satisfaction of humiliating someone he believed to be beneath him. But that satisfaction began to crumble when Hawk slowly straightened himself, his movements eerily controlled, and murmured in a low voice, "You shouldn't have done that." A warning so soft yet so heavy that a shiver ran through the small crowd forming around them. But Victor laughed, an arrogant, hollow sound that echoed off the brick walls of the street, and demanded, "What are you going to do about it?" Fully expecting fear, compliance, or at worst, a grumbled apology. What he did not expect was the sudden silence that fell over the street, the subtle rumble of engines approaching, or the presence of multiple
bikes rounding the corner like a pack, sensing one of its own in danger, each one ridden by figures wearing the same insignia on their jackets. A soaring silver hawk with wings spread wide, the mark of Hawk's motorcycle brotherhood, a group known throughout the city, not for trouble but for their fierce loyalty and their code of honor. And as they parked in a perfect line, engines cutting off in unison, the atmosphere shifted so quickly that even Victor felt his confidence waver. The bikers stepped off their machines, their heavy boots hitting the ground like thunder, their eyes locking onto Hawk's coffee-soaked face and then onto Victor, their expressions darkening with protective fury. And Victor, for the first time in a very long time, felt a cold spike of fear climb up his spine as he realized the man he attacked was not some random tough guy, but someone respected, someone surrounded by people willing to go to war for him. And Hawk raised a hand, stopping them from approaching, his voice calm as he said, "I'm all right," even though a red patch was forming on his cheek from the burn. And then, turning back to Victor with a gaze so steady it felt like judgment itself, he asked quietly, "Why did you do it?" A question so simple yet so profound that Victor found himself momentarily speechless. Because the truth was ugly and he knew it. He lashed out because he thought he could, because he believed wealth granted him immunity, because somewhere deep inside he feared men like Hawk, men who earned respect instead of buying it, and that fear had twisted into hatred. Victor tried to regain control, snapping, "Because people like you shouldn't be here. You're dirtying up the street." But his voice cracked ever so slightly, betraying his growing panic, and the bikers took a step closer, the tension rising like a storm ready to break. But again, Hawk raised a hand, preventing violence, showing more restraint than Victor had ever shown in his life. And he stepped toward Victor until they were inches apart, saying quietly but firmly, "Money doesn't make you strong, and hurting others doesn't make you powerful. You're just a scared man hiding behind a suit." Words that cut deeper than any punch ever could. And Victor, feeling the weight of truth for the first time, opened his mouth to retort, but found nothing, no insult, no justification, nothing but fear and the realization that the crowd's eyes were no longer admiring him but judging him, whispering, pointing, seeing him for what he was. Then Hawk did something no one expected. Instead of retaliating, he turned away and walked toward his bike, signaling his crew to stand down, and the onlookers murmured in surprise. But before he stepped away completely, he paused and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Walk away. Man, apologize. Don't make this worse for yourself," offering Victor an out, a chance to redeem himself. But Victor's pride roared inside him, refusing to let him bow to someone he had tried
to humiliate. Yet as he looked around, the crowd shaking their heads, the bikers towering like guardians of justice, the shame spreading across his chest, something inside him cracked. And for the first time in years, the mask of arrogance fell, leaving behind a frightened, fragile man who suddenly realized how small he truly was. And with a trembling voice he barely recognized, he whispered, I didn't mean..." Before collapsing to his knees, his confidence shattered, tears burning at the corners of his eyes, not from pity but from humiliation, regret, and the sudden crushing awareness of how wrong he had been. And the entire street watched as Victor Grayson, the man who minutes earlier believed he owned the world, was reduced to a broken figure, begging for forgiveness, hands clasped together, staring at the ground because he couldn't bear to look up while Hawk approached, not with anger but with a steady calm that silenced the entire block, lifting Victor's chin gently and saying, "You did something cruel, but today you get a chance to be better. Don't waste it." And those words, simple yet powerful, pierced Victor deeper than any punishment could, leaving him sobbing quietly as Hawk and his crew mounted their bikes, engines roaring back to life as they rode off, leaving Victor kneeling on the street he once believed he ruled. And as the last engine faded, the crowd slowly dispersed, some shaking their heads, some offering sympathetic glances, but all of them carrying with them a story they would tell for years. The day a rich man threw hot coffee on a biker, and minutes later was the one begging. And as Victor slowly stood wiping his face, the weight of what happened heavy on his shoulders, he whispered to himself a truth he had long forgotten. Money means nothing if you're not a decent human. And with that, the first step toward his transformation began. And before this chapter ends, dear viewer, if you want more powerful stories with lessons that shake the soul, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because your support helps us bring you more incredible tales of justice, karma, and redemption. Days passed after the humiliating encounter that shattered Victor Grayson's lifelong illusion of superiority, and though the city had moved on, the moment replayed in his mind endlessly. The hot coffee, the scarred biker, the silent crowd, the sting of shame. He tried burying it under work, wealth, and distractions, but nothing silenced the echo of Hawk's words. Today, you get a chance to be better. For the first time in years, those words made him pause, made him question the man he had become. And so one quiet morning, dressed not in a designer suit but in simple clothes that felt strange on him, he walked to the same street where everything happened, hoping somehow to find direction, forgiveness, or even just the courage to face himself. Fate, as always, was listening, because as he reached the curb, he heard the familiar rumble of engines behind him and turned to see Hawk and his crew pulling up, not with anger, but with curious, guarded eyes. Victor felt panic rush through him, but instead of running, he stepped forward and bowed his head, not out of fear, but out of genuine remorse, and said, "I came to apologize and to thank you. You could have ruined me, but you chose to teach me instead." The street fell silent for a moment before Hawk stepped closer, studying Victor's trembling hands and unsteady breath, and finally nodded. Forgiveness didn't come with a grand gesture, but with something subtle, a softening in Hawk's eyes, a sign that Victor's change was real. "If you want to be better," Hawk said, "you start by doing better. Come with us." Unsure but determined, Victor followed them to a community shelter the bikers regularly supported, a place filled with struggling families, tired workers, and kids who looked at the world with the same fear Victor once provoked in others. And as he helped serve food, carry boxes, and listen to stories of real hardship, something inside him transformed, the weight of his arrogance melting, with every grateful smile he received. By evening, he no longer felt like the man who threw hot coffee on someone simply for existing. He felt like someone beginning to understand kindness, humility, and purpose. Before parting ways, Hawk clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Everyone messes up. What matters is who you decide to be after." Victor nodded, knowing this was not the end of his journey but the beginning, and as he walked home under the warm glow of streetlights, he made a silent promise to live differently, more gently, more gratefully, more human. And to everyone watching or reading this story, if you believe in redemption, in second chances, in stories that remind us who we should be, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss a tale that could change a heart, just like this one.